Lightwave Logic. Jim Marcelli, President and CEO, or COO, excuse me. Michael's got an extensive background in the fields of optoelectronics, photonics, and semiconductors. He's worked on breakthrough communication tech at companies that include AT&T, Bell Labs, and Motorola. Michael assumed the role of CEO back in 2017. And Jim's involved with the day-to-day operations at Lightwave, really serving as the principal financial officer, I believe. And he's got over 35 years experience with multiple startups in tech and manufacturing companies. So I just want to thank both you guys for joining us today, and it's great to see you both. And I guess what I'll do now is turn it over to you, Michael, if you'd like, and we can go through your presentation. And then for the audience, we'll have Q&A at the end, if that's okay. So I'll turn it over to you, Michael. Thanks.
That's perfect. Thank you, Rick, and looking forward to the Q&A. So today I'm going to give a presentation at the Oppenheimer 5G Summit. I'm Michael Levy, and let's get into it. Well, first of all, we have our safe harbor slide because we're a public company. And let's have a quick look at the Lightwave Logic overview. And we can see on the right-hand side some of the financial numbers. I put in some numbers earlier today on closing yesterday on the share price. We can see share price is around about $18. The market cap is about $2 billion. We have cash on hand. In fact, our cash will now last us until first quarter 2023. We don't have a lot of liabilities, and we're headquartered in Englewood, Colorado, which is just south of Denver at the tech center. So the big thing about this slide, if you just focus on the left-hand side, is that we successfully uplisted to NASDAQ on the 1st of September. What was interesting about that was an organic uplist. So that means that we didn't have any reverse split, and we actually didn't raise any money either. And so that's quite unusual. And coming out of the last 6 months, we've been invited to speak at a lot of investment conferences as well as international techie conferences. And so we've been pretty busy conveying our technology, disruptive technology to various audiences. We have a strong balance sheet, and I've got a slide in the deck that talks about our patent position. We have a very nice IP and patent position, and I'll discuss that in a little bit more detail. And so this sort of slide doesn't happen too many times in your career. Ringing the bell at NASDAQ on the 10th of September, the closing bell. So that was a fun day for us. But what it did represent is a lot of hard work at getting an organic uplist from the OTC markets to the NASDAQ. And as you can tell, we sort of enjoyed the day. And in fact, the energy was unbelievable, as you can see from this slide. It's something that I'll cherish in my memory, and I think Jim will too. But the energy there was fantastic, and it really does show some of the feeling that we've had at Lightwave Logic over the last few years. So let's go to impact. We are a technology platform using electro-optic polymers that is designed to scale the existing internet structure. So that's the fiber optic communications. By providing transmission of data at higher speeds and much lower power. And we feel that is essential for 5G data communications and telecommunications market. And we're leveraging our own electro-optic polymer materials. That's the materials that we actually develop in the building you can see in the photograph to create photonic devices, and those are modulators. Those are devices that switch light really quickly in the fiber optic network. We have technology evaluation underway, and as I've just noted, in-house control of material supply, device fab, and package design, which is quite powerful from our standpoint. So let's have a quick look at the markets. There we go. I missed a slide here. It just took time loading. We solve headaches for the internet. And so this is a nice conceptual slide that shows the ones and zeros that go in the fiber optic network. I've also labeled that 5G backhaul. And so the modulators that we design from our polymers actually help create the ones and zeros. And we know, and we actually believe that the internet, the fiber optic infrastructure needs radical innovation to enable tomorrow's data services such as 5G in the current framework and the current infrastructure. And so we believe our photonic devices are the radical innovation that the internet needs. In fact, if you look at the traffic, I'm sure you've seen some of these types of graphs. This is a Cisco Global Cloud Index graph showing you the increase in traffic over years. But what we do know, as you can see from the left-hand side bullets, there's been an exponential rise of consumer level data usage. I've seen that on a number of charts. And the network costs and energy consumption have become the new hotspots for data providers, and that keeps on being talked about in the technical media. We believe our polymers, our electro-optic polymers, can transform the internet and 5G communications with much better performance. And in fact, if we look at some of the components markets, this just says market showing that includes 5G of fiber optic transceivers and modules. We believe they are a perfect vehicle for hybrid PICs. Hybrid PICs is a photonic integrated circuit that uses electro-optic polymers. And you can see over the next decade, I'm not sure if you can see the timeline at the bottom, it goes out to 2030. And the vertical shows the revenues in billions of dollars. You can see fiber optic transceivers and modules are expected to explode from a market forecast over the next decade. And that's a great vehicle for us to be focused in on. And so looking at photonics markets, including 5G, they are set to go very quickly too. And what I've shown here is roughly or approximately 10-year forecast for some of these markets. And you can see some of the existing markets that are like for fiber comms and high performance computing, DCI data center, which are ringed in the sort of the gold rings. But the one in the red ring is the 5G systems and the backhaul. And that's expected to grow to about a $10 billion market by 2030. And this is a huge opportunity for technology platforms such as ourselves, which has electro-optic polymers. It looks like my computer's a little slow here. So the next slide is the proprietary EO polymer technology. And so we are starting with fiber optic communications and 5G, and those current applications are very exciting. As I've already said earlier, less power, increased data throughput in the existing fiber optic infrastructure. We're using ultra-fast optical modulators, and you can see from the bottom left-hand corner of this slide, the current applications are pretty fast data rates. You can see aggregate data rates of 800 and 1600 gigabits per second using the speeds that our modulators can generate. But you can also see from this slide on the bottom right-hand corner, the future applications that are outside the communications area. I'm not really going to focus on that today because today is more about 5G. But you can see anywhere where light needs to be switched quickly, we certainly have an advantage with our technology platform. And so what are our competitive advantages? We're addressing some of the major pain points that are facing network operators using 5G. We certainly can reduce network energy costs because our modulators work with low voltage and they do save power. We actually enable faster networks because the bandwidths, the raw bandwidths of our modulators are 2 to 3 times faster than incumbent technologies. And because we are using a electro-optic organic platform, polymers, we have that platform flexibility where we can optimize for different types of specifications needed by the network operators. So our technology addresses the customer pain points. And in fact, in terms of targeting customers, you can see that we have an impact all the way through the value chain of not only optical component suppliers, but high-speed optics manufacturers, 5G network equipment manufacturers, and even internet service providers, which are the influencers. And these are the typical actors that you would see in the market verticals. So we have the potential to enter in many verticals using our technology platform. And so the business model, I have to go back here because my computer apparently is really slow. Our business model and commercialization roadmap has a multi-pronged business model. It's not just selling components, i.e. modulators that switch light quickly. It's also number 2 and number 3, which is the license of the technology, as well as technology transfer. And given that the customer base is vertically integrated these days, I think it's have to, from a company standpoint, we have to be flexible in our business model to not only sell components, but to do licensing and tech transfer as well. And so one of the important aspects of being able to do tech transfer and licensing is to have a really strong and robust intellectual property portfolio. And you can see here over 70 patents and patent applications. But what does this all mean? And the two areas I've ringed in red, one is freedom of manufacturing, which means we believe we have the freedom of manufacturing our own electro-optic polymers to go into the marketplace. Also, we acquired the Lumira Gig Optics patent portfolio about 3 years ago, which is a total of 15 patents. And that added to our own patent portfolio in these typical areas of polymers as well as packaging and device design makes us believe that we have a very strong patent portfolio that allows us that freedom of manufacturing and gives us the chance to do the tech transfer and the licensing business model I indicated on the last slide. So in terms of technologies, our technology breaks through the wall. And what I did to this slide, and this is a slide I've used before, that shows you where commercial optical devices are today. Now, it's a very techy slide, but to simplify this slide, we have that green dotted box, the oblique box, which is what I call the wall. To the left and upper side of that wall is where commercial optical devices are today. We can certainly look at this slide after this presentation because there's a lot of detail in it. And that's where I've also assigned where 3G and 4G are today, and even 5G. And so we have a technology that breaks through that wall, going that same direction as that pink arrow with polymer modulators and even faster polymer modulators that takes us beyond 5G towards 6G. And so we see our technology platform as the headroom to go much, much faster than competition. And so if you look at polymer technology in terms of modulators, vis-a-vis what I call the pack, these are commercial modulators today that use in semiconductors, we're ahead of the pack. And you can see by the green circles, the performance in terms of raw optical bandwidth is much higher than, for example, indium phosphide modulators, as well as silicon and lithium niobate modulators. And so we see our technology being disrupted because of its performance. And that means our polymers are positioned very well for 5G systems. This is what a polymer modulator chip looks like. This is a stacked polymer modulator. All I'm doing here is just showing you what the chip looks like. It's polymer actually onto a silicon-based platform. You can see where the light goes in with the red arrow on the left and where the light comes out with the red arrow on the right. The active region is where the optical waveguides are, is where I pointed with the red arrow in the middle. And this is standard for us. And so the natural integration with big foundries, we have 3 platforms here. The chip I showed in the last slide was the polymer stack. And we're now working on that. We're together with the Polymer Plus and the Polymer Slot. What's interesting about the Polymer Plus and the Polymer Slot is those are polymer technologies that boost up the performance of a photonics integrated platform such as silicon photonics, because we can actually use our material, add that to the silicon photonics and improve the performance of the modulators. So we're turbocharging the silicon photonics and integrated photonics platforms with our electro-optic polymers. And so if you look at the attributes of polymers vis-a-vis semiconductors, here are some spider charts. And the way you look at spider charts is if the colored area fills the whole diamond, then you've covered all the major metric points. And you can see the polymers are the gold ones that I've ringed in red below. See, polymers cover most of the diamond vis-a-vis silicon, which is in blue, indium phosphide in green, lithium niobate in red, and a new technology that a startup is using in Switzerland, barium titanate. And you can see the technology strengths and weaknesses, and the EO polymers platforms are attractive from an attribute standpoint. And you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, the Polymer Plus and the Polymer Slot are ideal to be fabricated in scale, in mass scale, in silicon foundries. And so if you look at the technical comparison, now this is a techie graph. This is showing the 3 dB electro-optical bandwidth of modulators. and that's that green dotted line. But what that actually says, real simply, is that you can see the competitors, which I've labeled the pack in gold: silicon, lithium niobate, and indium phosphide. Their bandwidths are actually much lower than the Lightwave Logic's polymers. And so Lightwave Logic EO polymers are much higher in terms of optical bandwidth. What does that mean? That means that the polymers that create the modulated devices that switch to light are much faster than the semiconductor technologies. And in fact, this is an interesting slide I brought in because in 5G systems, you need in the backhaul both 1550 and 1310 nanometers. And one of the interesting things that we developed and publicized last year was that not only can we do 1550 nanometer Mach-Zehnder modulators using our material, but we can do 1310 as well. That puts us right in the eye of 5G backhaul systems. And that's an important building block to add to 1550, is to be able to have modulators work at 1310. And so I'd route to maturity and volume. As you can see here, we're really focused in the dark green areas. In this scale, which is called the technology readiness scale, this is a scale folks look for how advanced you are in your development. So we're definitely in the prototyping and piloting stage, and we're actually positioning ourselves for the orange areas in manufacturing. And that really puts me on to the next few slides, where we're looking at the business roadmap. And in order to get effectively a good position in manufacturing, we've got to be able to partner with foundries. And that's what I said in that one of those orange boxes in the black font there in the center. The current engagement includes foundry partnering, because quite honestly, you need to have a big silicon foundry to really get scale with the silicon-based silicon photonics using our technology. And that's what we've been working on. And we came and gave public guidance in May this year, and we'll continue to work with foundries on this front. And then talking about foundries, let's look at the foundry business themselves. And we can see silicon foundries are definitely hungry for the opto business. And this certainly has accelerated over the last few years. As you can see here, these are usual actors that are foundry players. And these players are all interested in the opto business. Why? If we look at the bullet points on the left-hand side, these silicon fabrication plants, they want silicon photonics, SiPh, because that's the new upside in number of wafers they can drive through their factories. Really, foundries are based on getting wafers through their factories. And photonics actually is an attractive market opportunity for that now. And in order to do that, you have to have your process, to fabricate the electro-optic polymers into modulators. That fabrication has to be accepted into the foundry PDKs. And the PDKs, we can see from the bottom left-hand corner of the slide, is the process development kit. And that will drive hybrid integration of the integrated photonic platforms, the PIC platforms. And so as you can see from the takeaway at the bottom of this slide, the drive to 200 and 300 millimeter allows competitive PIC cost per volume and scale, and that gives a big impact for 5G systems. And so partnering with silicon foundries is what we're doing today. And we are working on having our polymers accepted into the PDKs, the process development kits. These are the standard fabrication techniques. And things like wet etching, dry etching, metallization, dielectric depth, spinning, curing, baking, Poland. These are things that we can do ourselves in our small silicon fab, but also the foundries can do in a large silicon foundry. And so this is something that is, we believe, getting into the PDKs is a perfect vehicle for our polymer platform. And that's the route that we're going to get scale for commercialization. And we did receive an industry award at the ECOC conference, ECOC, in September this year. And the award was for optical integration. And there's a picture of me showing the Lightwave Logic sign, I guess, and holding the little past trophy. In terms of leadership, we have a very experienced management and board with deep technical expertise. For example, let me just pull out a couple of these folks. Fred Leonberger, for example, 35 years in optical modulators, was one of the pioneers of lithium niobate modulators back 20, 25 years ago when he was at Uniphase. That's the U in JDSU. and so a very experienced person in modulators and telecom and datacom. We also have Joe Miller, who 35 years plus in chemistry and fiber optics, the CTO of DuPont and Corning. So two very deep folks who really understand the technology and the business and the markets. And plus, we have extensive experience with other folks on the board, which I do not want to minimize. But we've also supplemented this main board with an advisory board, and we have 4 candidates here, 4 folks that are very deep in the technology from different fields. Craig is now working at Lumina, which is genetics, and really understands optics and silicon photonics. Christoph as well, has cut his teeth at IBM Zurich and has done some extensive work in photonics. Andreas with high-speed microwave work in Finisar, U2T, Photonics, as well as the Fraunhofer. And we got Frankie, who's an expert in polymers from the organic LED standpoint. And Frankie was instrumental in making polymers commercially accepted by the OLED industry into displays and televisions, and really has experience at making polymers reliable and stable. And so we have a world-class advisory board, second to none. And certainly myself and the technical team, we utilize and communicate with this team regularly to make sure that we're doing the right things and we're focused correctly. And I'm waiting for the next slide to come up. And it skipped. So let's go to the summary. There we go. So partnering for success. So what's the impact for 5G? Our technology platform is working to scale the existing internet structure and 5G networks. And we have capabilities at both 1310 and 1550. And our technology is designed to transmit data at higher speeds and much lower power. And that is essential for 5G backhaul, data communications, and telecommunications market. We're leveraging internally engineered electro-optic polymers to create photonic devices that convert data from electrical signals to optical signals, and that's using the modulated device platform in those wavelengths. And we're working with multiple foundries, big silicon foundries, packaging partners, module transceiver partners to position Lightwave for future high volume production. And we have technology evaluation underway. And so, the essence and the takeaway at the bottom, we're leveraging our partners to commercialize our technology in polymers for applications such as 5G. And I want to leave the slide deck at that. And that's our IR relations contact if anybody wants to go forward with some questions. But as of right now, I'll let Rick take over.
Yep. Thanks, Michael. It was a great presentation. And yeah, you do have multiple questions. I don't know if I'll get through them all here that have come up through the course of your presentation, but maybe the first one is just, your polymer, your solution offers just, I think, a clear performance advantage to incumbent solutions. And you mentioned lithium niobate. You've got sort of the godfather, as you mentioned, Fred Liebenberger on your board. Sort of the godfather of lithium niobate, obviously is a believer. So, what are you seeing in the marketplace? Are folks eager to adopt? Are you seeing any resistance to change, because lithium niobate's been around so long? I keep talking about lithium niobate, but other solutions too. Are you seeing, I guess, what are you seeing in terms of hurdles to adoption?
So what we've seen in the last year is, well, let's start at the top. This presentation really hasn't changed in 4 years. So Jim and I have been giving this presentation for a long time. And so over the last year, folks have realized that they're expending tens of watts of power in electronics with things like DSP chips to improve the performance of the photonics, because we really don't have really high performance optical modulators out there in the field today. So if you look at what's in the field today in terms of incumbent technologies, yes, there's lithium niobate, but really it's indium phosphide and silicon. They're the really big drivers today, and the performance of those modulators are reasonably slow. And so what we've done as an industry, we've solved those problems by expending more power with DSP and ASIC chips to improve the performance of the optics. And the way we've done it is we used more complicated encoding schemes. Instead of having the NRZ 1010, which is a nice simple waveform, We now have PAM4 and PAM8, and we have different QAMs. And these are different types of encoding schemes where we have smaller eye diagrams. The signal to noise ratio has to be controlled more carefully, and we use electronics to do it. And so I think what we're offering is well, if you want a faster modulator, you can certainly implement that. And if you want to design something that's more DSP light, if you like, and is a little bit more conservative on power consumption, you can certainly go that way. Or if you want to use the existing DSP infrastructure, you can, with the same sort of power consumption, you can go 2-3 times faster. And I think folks are realizing that we've got to solve this solution. You can't just keep encoding with more complex encoding schemes just to solve the problem that photonics doesn't go fast.
So thanks, Michael. And so I'm just sifting through. Like I say, you've got a lot of questions here. So one question is just on the fact that I guess you've talked in the past, and I've heard you speak about that your polymer tech is easy to fab and uses existing tools to incorporate into the PDKs, which you mentioned through your presentation. This person's asking, the process seems to be taking longer than the typical process on the electronic side. And if there's a reason for that, or if we can help us understand why it's maybe taking a little longer to happen.
I don't believe it's taking any longer at all. I mean, we gave some public guidance in May that we were working with foundries. And when you work with the foundry PDKs, you have to make sure that your process is accepted into the PDKs. I mean, at the very highest level, we have standard fab techniques. I mean, we're already processing and fabricating devices here in Englewood, but we have a 1,500 square foot fab using 4-inch wafers. And, we're transposing that technology into larger format wafers. And it's the same techniques. It's wet etching, dry etching, standard metallization, dielectrics. And so these are the standard tools and the standard techniques you would find in a big silicon foundry. There's nothing new here. And so we're not asking the foundries to do anything new. We're just asking the foundries to take our technology and make sure it works in their PDKs. I don't believe it's taken much longer than expected, and I think we're making pretty good progress.
And speaking of foundry, you've got several questions on foundry, and so I guess one of them is sort of how do you anticipate, like, sort of what's the revenue structure that you'll have with the foundry partners? I mean, are these going to be upfront payments? Is it more a license and royalty type model?
I think the right answer to that is that we have to be flexible in our business model. And so, as you can see, we have a 3-pronged business model that is, selling optical components, as well as being tech transfer and licensing. And every foundry has their own way that they want to engage with companies such as ourselves. But we also have to think about the customers that are vertically integrated. Some of them have deals with foundries, and some of them have their own foundries, and some have different types of contract manufacturers. I think the key for us is that we have to be flexible enough to make sure our technology becomes ubiquitous. That means we want our technology everywhere. We know that Mother Nature is working with us in terms of raw optical performance. And so we want to be flexible enough so that if the foundry comes back and says, yeah, we want to tech transfer it, let's put a deal together, or we want a combination of tech transfer and licensing, then we'll sit down and we'll negotiate what makes sense. But I believe from our standpoint, we need to be flexible enough to make sure our technology just literally becomes ubiquitous.
And a question on that is sort of if you have a sense of how long it would take to switch a typical data center's transceivers over, to your polymer tech, and maybe if you have a sense of what that switching cost looks like, the payback period, once that change has been effected.
Yeah, that's something we haven't provided any guidance with. We certainly internally are looking at those types of numbers. But certainly we haven't conveyed that publicly because each different data center has their own way of what do they call it, forklift upgrades. So it depends on when they want to do it and how they want to do it. But certainly each data center, each system that's put in the 5G backhaul in place has their own way of implementing those things. But I think we'll be, when we're comfortable to provide guidance, we certainly will on that. But we certainly haven't provided any guidance right now, Rick.
And here's another one, Michael, just kind of looking at it from end markets, and this person's asking, sort of what are the likely first large, significant use cases that you see adopting?
Certainly, short haul interconnects with 1310 and 1550 wavelengths seems to be an interesting sweet spot for us. I think in those types of applications, folks are really demanding high speed and low power solutions. I think one of the interesting things that's happening in the marketplace today is that, and I think most folks who are technically oriented who are watching this presentation have seen the battle between CPO co-packaging solutions versus pluggable solutions. And for us, we want to provide electro-optic polymers to either. In fact, if both win, we'll provide polymers to both. And so we want to be a common platform to increase the performance and lower the power in either solution. And certainly we've seen a lot of discussion in telecom and datacom, as well as 5G, about how packaging is supposed to go, whether it should be pluggable or non-pluggable. But I think if you want a technology to be ubiquitous, you want to be able to support both.
Got it. So thanks. And then someone else is asking, well, there's a couple repeat questions here.
There's a finance one. Maybe Jim can join.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is here as well. I mean, so the question is sort of, when do you expect, or when should we expect sort of partnership and revenue guidance, timeline for that?
Do you want to try that one, Jim?
No, well, we have internal plans, obviously, that Michael and I have gone through with the board of directors, but we haven't gone public with that. One of the things, by the way, just on the finance side, is we put a $100 million universal shelf in place so that we could accelerate, but quite frankly, as quickly as we can. We didn't want to have money as any sort of an issue with us trying to accelerate. So we're trying to move as quickly as we can, but we haven't at this point given any guidance.
Okay. I've got another, again, multiple questions, but someone's asking, how long have you guys been seriously engaged with data center and telco customers? How far along are you down that path?
Well, I think we've given guidance, at least over the last year, that we've been receiving feedback from different types of customers on the performance of our polymers. It may be longer than a year. I just have to look at the PRs, but certainly it's at least a year. And so I think that's probably a reasonable answer to your question, Rick.
Okay. And a question, I know you talked about all the patents you guys have. Someone's asking if you could describe or give some color around, what everybody kind of calls a deep patent moat, basically blocking patents, things like that. If you could give some color around how hard it'd be for somebody to step in and replicate what you're doing.
Well, I can certainly do the best I can, but I'm not a patent attorney or a lawyer, so you just have to take everything with a pinch of salt here. But if you look at our patent portfolio, it ranges from the basic materials, the chromophores and the polymers that we put together to create electro-optic polymers, as well as the fabrication, as well as the device design and how to package a lot of the modulators in actually some of the recent patents they've issued on chip scale packaging. And so it's a portfolio of patents that range from the basic organic materials all the way up to packaging. And I believe there might be one patent there that's module transceiver oriented. But generally speaking, what we want to do is to make sure that we have the freedom of manufacturing so that we don't overtly infringe anybody else. And that's really what freedom of manufacturing means. But I have to say these things with the fact that I'm not a lawyer, and our patents haven't been through litigation as far as I'm aware. And so we look at our patent portfolio, and we believe that it's a very strong patent portfolio in electro-optic polymers, and it's been boosted by, the three main companies that were doing this technology, 10, 15 years ago, which is Lumera and Giga Optics and BR Photonics, and we have their patents in our portfolio. So that means that we have a pretty strong position in the marketplace.
And another question, if you look at sort of, I guess, the setup looking into 2022, this person's asking, do you have any significant technical hurdles, still to sort of overcome or achieve at this point, or are we at the point now where, you're sort of advocating the tech, you're getting it accepted and getting it slotted into platforms? So, are we sort of at that stage, or how would you characterize, I guess, life cycle?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think it really started off in May this year when I first gave guidance on the fact that we're working with big silicon foundries. We hadn't given guidance before then. And that was something that certainly attracted a lot of attention to the company. And I think, we're working through that process. And when you take a technology that's been developed, through a smaller fab with smaller wafers, and you work to get that integrated into PDKs of silicon foundries, I think that's something that we're working through right now. And I think that's probably the best answer to address that question, Rick.
And another tech question is just basically, are you guys going to develop your own transceiver, or are you going to rely more on your foundry or their customers to develop that?
Yeah, another good question. So, at the 20,000 foot level, we have a unique position in developing our own electro-optic polymers. And that's what's really unique. Yes, we can design them using a fab, and we can have high frequency design, which we've got some patents on. But that's, you've got to look at the uniqueness of your position in the marketplace. There's probably 20, maybe 30 different fiber optic transceiver companies that, that put boxes together with different components or pick chips these days. And so, that's not unique for us. What we want to do is we want to make sure that our electro-optic polymer is ubiquitous inside the transceivers. That doesn't mean we have to do the transceivers ourselves, but we certainly can partner with transceiver companies. And I think it makes more sense for us to focus on what we're really good at, what we're unique at, and where we can add value to the customer in terms of, enabling their markets through high performance data rates and lower power solutions.
Thanks, Michael. And I think if we got time for maybe one more quick one, and it's probably for Jim, but it's a balance sheet and burn rate question. And it's just sort of, I know you mentioned, I think in your prepared remarks, Michael, that you've got cash to carry you to 2023. Do you foresee another raise between now and 2023? Do you see 2023 sometime as a going to be a sort of a break-even event at some quarter in 2023, or any color you can give around that?
Well, first of all, we haven't given any guidance as far as break-even or any sort of revenue guidance. However, with regards to burn rate, in our 930 10Q that was filed on the 15th of November, we show that enough cash based on our current burn rate and our projected budget for 2022 to have enough cash to take us into early 2023. However, as I said earlier, we have a $100 million universal shelf so that we can accelerate things as quickly as we can when we do need cash. That's why good corporate governance, that's why we have that in place.
Thanks, Jim. And thanks, Michael. It was great seeing you guys. We really appreciate you carving out the time today to talk to us. So it was a great presentation and a great conversation. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you. Thanks, Rick.